Hey folks, today I'm going to show you how to draw out your bow design on a blank stave. This part of bow making sets the foundation for how the rest of the build is going to go. So stay tuned and I'm going to show you guys how to get it done. The first thing you need to do is measure the length of your stave. I will be working in inches since I am from the US, but I will throw the metric conversions up on the screen for you. So you can see the stave is just about 59 inches long. There's a little bit of a bevel here, and so once we get that trimmed completely, it's going to come right to that 59-inch mark. So at this point in the process, you're going to have to make a decision, and there's two major directions you can go with it. You need to decide if it's going to be a stiff-handled bow or if you want a bend through the handle bow. That is going to determine what you draw on here next. Stiff handle bow has this really thick handle section, and your limb bends all the way up until this point right here, and then in your fade, it's where the bending stops. So there's no bending that goes on in this section of the bow, and then as you go down the fade to the bottom limb, your bow starts bending again. On a bend through the handle bow like this one, the bow will bend through the entire handle, just like the name implies. It can be a little bit stiffer here in the center, but it is still working. This bow is going to be a bend through the handle bow. For a stiff handle bow, I will do a video on that later. So now that you know the length of your stave, you need to find the very center of it. This will form the center of your bow. This stave is 59 inches long. That means the center point is going to be 29 and a half inches. Draw your line all the way across it, and then if you would like, you can draw a C on there just to make a note. That is the center of the bow. So the next step is to draw the center line of the bow onto the stave. And if you have a straight grain stave that's straight from one end all the way to the other, that's pretty simple. What I would normally do is just come to the center of the stave and find the very middle and then follow the grain line all the way to the end of the stave, and then I would follow that grain line all the way to the other end of the stave. So I told you guys about it earlier. This bow has a pretty good knot here. There's actually a pretty good sized one down here on the end too. I want to cut that knot completely out of the bow. It's on the edge. There's not enough meat around it here to safely include it. So I'm going to design this bow around this knot. With these two knots on the side of the stave, I'm actually going to outline the edge of my bow before I draw the center line. One good thing about Osage is that when you split the stave, most of the time the edges of your split will follow the grain. And that means you can actually use your finger as a gauge and then put your pencil on there, and then you can just slide along the edge to follow the grain line. This doesn't always work for all of the fine details, but it will get you pretty close on drawing the edge of your bow. So I have drawn this line and followed the grain line around that knot from one end of the bow to the other. But what I wanted to see was, and could I exclude this knot and still have enough wood here to create a bow? When I'm drawing my bows onto a stave, I tend to draw them oversized because, as you all know, it's a lot easier to take wood off than it is to put it back on. So I really have this one probably a little wider than I'm going to go. I planned on making this bow 1.5 inches wide, which would be about there. It's about 1 7/8 inches from the edge of my stave to the line that I drew. excluding the knot. So halfway between that would be, I think, about 15/16. Anywhere there near the center can do, and you can see it's halfway between, and that gives us wiggle room. We're going to narrow this down as we get the bow further processed later on. We'll end up narrowing this down quite a bit, but for now we're going to leave some extra wood to work with. This spot right here is the very center of my bow width wise. You can see these really faint white lines. That is the grain, and you can see how they are kind of wavy and they curve around. We're going to find the white line there by my mark, and we're going to follow that all the way to the end of the bow. And then we're going to come on this side, and we're going to follow it all the way to the other end of the bow. That will form the center line of your bow. This is not always easy to do. Sometimes you got to keep moving your head around like you're looking at your food in the microwave to see these lines under a different angle of the light. Sometimes I find it useful to kind of do a sketch instead of just draw a straight line. You can kind of get back a little further and just see the general direction of the line and the lines around it. You can see in this spot, I've started wandering up towards the side of the stave, and sometimes that's just what your grain is actually doing, and other times it's because you didn't see it right and you jumped off onto the wrong grain and followed it. If you start noticing something like this, then slow down, look at it from different angles, and try to see what's going on. So from what I can tell, I actually jumped grain lines right about here, but not very much. It's actually pretty darn close. And on this edge that I drew over here earlier, I actually jumped grain lines and didn't accurately draw that either. And that was a result of following the edge when I drew that. I followed it with my finger like that. And when I cleaned this stave up with my draw knife, I probably went through some of that grain on the side, which is why the grain on the bow doesn't perfectly follow the side of the bow. Long story short, I think I'm on the right track here. I've got the center line drawn. I've got the one edge drawn on there. The next thing I would need to do is just get this bottom edge drawn on. So I'm going to find the grain right there near the edge and just start to follow it. Now I have drawn this thing about a ½ inch wider than it's going to be when it's finished. That's just because I like to leave extra room when I'm working on it. I like that visual line that I can see. I know that I need to stop at that point and slow down. That's just the way I do it. I will come back as we get this cut down. I will remeasure certain parts of the bow and draw those lines a little bit finer and try to take it off in smaller amounts. I had originally planned to cut this bow out in this same video, but the process was taking a little bit longer. I want to keep the videos somewhat short, so I'm going to split the process of cutting the bow out into a separate video. I've already began filming it. If you guys are interested in this, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to my channel, click the notifications bell. I'm going to have this next video out here shortly. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next time. At this point in the process, you're going to have to, so at this point in the process, you're going to have to got a little squeaker over there. No more squeaking, buddy.